Welcome back. All right. The last power rankings I'll be doing in this room for a little bit. In that next Saturday's power rankings I'll probably be doing in our rec room / downstairs kitchen. I'll be in that room starting on Monday. So just throwing that out there. I know there's people who come in just for the power rankings once a week. I've done videos explaining my power rankings even recently, and then people the complaints stay the same. So people don't generally watch that. They complain about the power rankings. They just skip to the end. Number 32. You don't have to skip to the end if you're a San Jose fan. You're right here. The Sharks stay 32nd, and with the trade they made today, where Granlund and Ceci are gone, I don't think it's going to get easier for this team going forward. I mean, there's some encouraging things with like Smith and Celebrini and that kind of thing, but in general, yeah, San Jose is at the bottom of the board. It kind of feels like that's probably where they spend the rest of the season. Number 31, dropping one spot from last week, is Chicago. So the Chicago Blackhawks dropped down to 31st. Their game, they play well at certain points in time. Uh, Generally, it's not as lopsided. It doesn't feel like the losses are as lopsided as last year, but there's still that lack of top end talent to support young players like Bedard, Nazar, and to some extent Bertuzzi as well. Bertuzzi still qualifies as young, doesn't he? So, anyways, number 31 is Chicago. Number 30, also dropping one spot from last week, is Nashville. The Preds go out on the road, and if there was any thought that maybe they were going to get back into the chase, they've kind of extinguished that this week. The Nashville Predators are a team that was supposed to be much better than this. And I do wonder, are we going to see Nashville sell off? What do you sell off if you're Nashville? And I don't think Stamkos Marchessault will go anywhere because Barry Trotz has already said he intends to basically rearm the team this coming summer. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, Nashville, number 30 this week. Number 29, moving up two spots from last week, is Buffalo. Yes, the Sabres move up to 29 based on, I mean, they had the win over Nashville. They had that huge win over Boston as well. And I mean, huge is in the score. 7-2 is insane. So Buffalo moves up a couple of spots this week, part of it being that Nashville and Chicago are relatively easy for them to pass. I'm not saying this is a sign Chicago and Nashville are beneath them and therefore they're getting better. It's just, it's a matter of degrees of not playing well right now. And so Buffalo's number 29. Number 28, dropping one spot from last week, is Philadelphia. So the Flyers stay in the bottom row for another week. The Philadelphia Flyers clearly in a rebuild, and the trade with Farabee and Frost going to Calgary is another indication of that. I will be interested to see how Kuzmenko responds to the trade. Kuzmenko is only, a couple of years removed from being a pretty good goal scorer in the NHL, but it wasn't translating that second year in Vancouver. He gets traded to Calgary. Now he's traded to Philadelphia. We'll see if he rediscovers a scoring touch. Number 27, moving up one spot from last week, is Pittsburgh. So the Penguins move up the one spot. The Penguins help to contribute to Nashville being 30th this week rather than 29th. The Penguins, I think the Marcus Pettersson trade is a sign that the sale is now on. The Canucks are going to sit down and talk to him about an extension too. That's already out there. And they're going to talk to Drew O'Connor about an extension as well. But for the Penguins getting Heinen back, you guys already know what to expect with Heinen. He seemed to fit in seamlessly tonight. And they got the win. So we'll see how things go with Pittsburgh from here. Number 26, dropping two spots from last week, is Seattle. The Kraken, still losing often enough that, their playoff hopes have really, they've kind of evaporated. Although if you watch broadcasts, and then it doesn't even have to be Seattle, it could be a national broadcast, there's a lot of rah around certain teams that are way below the playoff line, including Seattle. And I get it, because on paper, Seattle has a pretty good team, but the results on the ice just have not worked in their favor often enough for me to move them up. No, beating San Jose does not keep your spot on the board. Number 25, and dropping three spots from last week, is St. Louis. The Blues are in the bottom row. For St. Louis, it's been kind of a tough season. They're playing tomorrow, right? They're in Utah. That, like I said in the preview / news video for that, and that's going to be an interesting one. But St. Louis is in the bottom row, and I think they've been in the bottom row a couple of times. I do intend to make a video and post it to the channel of like the averages for teams this season. At least I'm considering that for that to be the Saturday that I'm down in California to make that the post that's on the channel. And I don't have to worry about posting it Sunday morning because Saturday is kind of quiet in that it's the Four Nations tournament. And so that's not going to affect the power rankings, anyways, right? All right, so that's your bottom row. Usually there's the least amount of argument with the bottom row. So we move into the row where there's some argument. Number 24 is Anaheim. The goals have started to go in. They're starting to get that production. The interesting thing is Leo Carlsson's the one that's still a little bit behind when it comes to getting that all figured out. But I like Leo Carlsson. I still think, and I'm still believing this, that Leo Carlsson will turn into a. I don't know if he's ever going to be a superstar, but I think he's going to be a very good top six forward for them, and I think the production is going to get better. It just hasn't as of yet, and yet Anaheim's out of the bottom row again. So there you go. Number 23, moving down 3 spots from last week, is the New York Rangers. The Rangers have had a tough time of it. They picked up JT Miller. It resulted in him getting a couple of goals, but they allowed 6. So the loss against Boston definitely helped them to drop down in the rankings, combined with the fact that that's, 3 losses in a row for them. So the Rangers are still in peril when it comes to their playoff hopes. They're still a team that right now the odds of them making the playoffs are well below 50%, according to most of the odds makers, and yeah, their results this week were not great. Number 22, moving up 3 spots from last week, Vancouver. The only loss they had this week was in Dallas, and I'm not going to bust them down for losing in Dallas. Dallas has an excellent home record, and Dallas is seen as a contending team. So the Vancouver Canucks move out of the bottom row for the first time in a bit, and they're number 22 this week. So we'll see if they can keep it up. They're at home against Detroit tomorrow. That's a back-to-back for Detroit. We'll see if Vancouver can jump on them. But for Vancouver, they're playing better. I thought they showed a little bit more fight at the end of that Dallas game, even though they were losing it. And yeah, I think they played pretty well this week. It'll be interesting once everybody's used to their new surroundings to see how this team really gels together. I've seen a lot of comments too about Heedle's head injuries, and yeah, that's going to be a concern. But we've seen young players go through those before and still end up having good long careers. So maybe Heedle could be one of those guys. Number 21 on the board and dropping 2 spots from last week is Utah. Utah's been inconsistent in between games, from one game to the next kind of thing, as well as in the game itself. They just need that consistent effort, and it's kind of a top to bottom thing with the players. They're also top heavy when it comes to their scorers, so that's definitely an issue for them. They need better depth scoring, which I guess we could have pegged them to have a problem with before the season started. And so they're 21 this week. But still entertaining games when they play. Number 20, also dropping 2 spots from last week, is Tampa. Tampa Bay's got some issues right now when it comes to staying above that playoff line. There are so many teams right now in the East that are playing well and charging up towards that play, or at least we switch which team it is seemingly from week to week. But Tampa Bay is now that team that may very well be vulnerable. And I'm not sure how you fix that either. I'm kind of surprised that Tampa Bay hasn't made a big trade. Because with all the big trades that have been going down, I'm surprised Tampa Bay isn't in on that because they're getting closer to that playoff line and they're headed in the wrong direction. Tonight's game against the Islanders, another example of how they just can't get those 2 points when they need them. Number 19, dropping 5 spots from last week, Boston. The win today helped prevent them from dropping further from where they were last week. So in other words, they moved up from where they were last night on the board, but Boston's having troubles, and the 7-2 loss against Buffalo, that was an oof. They have had struggles in third periods. There's definitely a fragile confidence when it comes to Boston. And it's too bad because I'm starting to see that now that Poitras's on the team, things have got better. But it's that in the third period, as soon as the puck goes in, they kind of panic. And you can kind of feel like there's more goals coming. And that's not great for a team that's looking for wins. Looking forward to maybe making the playoffs. But everybody's got games in hand on them, so it's not going to be easy. Number 19, 18. Yeah, 18. Moving up 5 spots. Making sure I didn't miss a puck somewhere along the way. That'd be terrible. Number 18, the Islanders. They move up 5 spots from last week. 5. So, for the New York Islanders, it's a 7-game winning streak. They've moved themselves up to 18th. I am sure there will be Islander fans that are not happy that they're only 18th on the board. but 2 weeks ago they were 27th. So they've moved up 9 spots in 2 weeks. Islanders are playing well, and this is why various times this year I've said I don't really count the Islanders out because of this. I know what they can do, and would I be surprised if they snuck into a playoff spot? Not really. No, they've done it before. Number 17, dropping 7 spots from last week, is Montreal. The wheels have kind of fallen off for Montreal. And that's the thing with, having a really good month of hockey and then being able to keep that going. I think part of it is, at least my guess is, that they're not sneaking up on teams now. Teams look and go, okay, these guys are close to the playoff line. And I think there's better effort. I think they're getting matchups that are a little more difficult for them. And so for Montreal, they're just not sneaking up on anybody. Teams have really brought their A game against Montreal, which wasn't necessarily the case during that month where they did move up into the top row. And I will stand by that. They were playing very, very well, but it feels like teams have adjusted. So now Montreal's going to have to adjust again and start getting some wins. But that hope's kind of started to fade for them again. So we move into the top half of the board. Number 16 this week, dropping 1 spot from last week, is Calgary. So the Flames, still above the playoff line. They did not get a point tonight. They gave it their best efforts. They did not end up getting a point tonight. We'll see what the Flames do tomorrow in Seattle. They have struggled with the second half of back-to-backs. So that's going to be interesting because Vancouver is right there and could jump past them potentially. So we shall see what happens there. But the Flames just dropped the 1 spot. Before everybody gets mad at me for them dropping it all, which they might, the reason they dropped the 1 spot is because Detroit climbed 6 spots this week. Detroit is the biggest climber. Nobody else climbed 6 spots. So there's another that's climbed pretty well too, but Detroit gets the number 1 spot. So that's why I'm wearing Detroit this week. And it's an Yzerman. I thought, I'll pick the Yzerman jersey because early in the season, many people, myself included, saying the Yzer plan might be derailed here. Things aren't going well. Now they are. They're on a 4-game heater now, and they've had some winning streaks under Todd McClellan. Things look pretty good for Detroit, and this is without Kane. They're doing it. Then Shine, 31-year-old forward comes in. Shine, never heard of him. Dominic Shine, and he's apparently pretty good. So Detroit's having some good fortune and finding some treasures within their organization like Shine. So there you go. And Edmondson started to develop into that defenseman they thought he would be as well. So yeah, Detroit's playing really well. Now they're in the top half of the board. Number 14 this week and rising 2 spots from last week is New Jersey. For the Devils, they're what? I'm gonna cheat and look at the board here. They're still 4-3-3 in their last 10. So they've won 4 of their last 10, but it does feel like they're starting to figure things out again. So even though they're without Markstrom, Allen's played well, so that's good news. And as long as Allen keeps playing well, New Jersey stays in a playoff spot. Ideally, stays in the top 3 position in that division, and you just never know. If they get a matchup with Carolina, if Carolina somehow caught Washington, just fantasy booking kind of thing. I think New Jersey will do well in a series against either Carolina or Washington. I don't know if they'd win it, but I think they'll do well. Number 13 this week, dropping 1 spot from last week, is Minnesota. That effort tonight in Ottawa, that was an embarrassing game for Minnesota. And coming into today, they were higher than 13th. They were certainly higher than but that game was just, I had to make a little bit of what I refer to as a market correction. And so they dropped to 13th this week. Just 1 spot drop, but yeah, that game tonight, that was rough, and we'll see what they do next week. But Minnesota needs to put that game in the rearview mirror, and they're probably going to have to adjust to life without Hartman for a while. Hartman hasn't had a great year, though, either. So I think part of what we saw tonight is probably just that frustration from Hartman about how the year's going. I am not using that as an excuse. It's not an excuse. I'm just saying odds are he's probably pretty frustrated about how things have gone. It has not gone well for him. Number 12, moving up 5 spots from last week, Ottawa, the team that beat the Minnesota Wild this week. Ottawa sitting 3rd in their division and looking pretty good. Yeah, I don't have anything bad to say about Ottawa. Things are going pretty well. I'm glad Stützle was okay. Hopefully, when he wakes up tomorrow, he doesn't have a bad headache, and we're not talking about how he's going to be out for a while. That does happen. So The Ottawa Senators right now firing on all cylinders without Ullmark. They haven't even got Ullmark back yet, and I don't think we expected that. So they've defied expectations. Maryland and Forsberg are both giving them good goaltending, and they move up to 12th. Number 11 this week, dropping 4 spots from last week, LA. They did win tonight, prevents them from dropping further. If they'd lost that game in Carolina, odds are they'd be 12th, and the Ottawa Senators would be 11th. Winning in Carolina is impressive, considering Carolina was playing pretty darn well coming into tonight's action. The LA Kings, maybe this is the start of a turnaround. They've been very hot and cold this year, so maybe this is the start of something more for them. Hopefully, because the Kings have had a tough time of it. And maybe the fact that I made a video on their struggles means all of a sudden they're going to stop struggling. Because sometimes that does happen. Not always. Not as often as people might make it sound, but it has. It has happened. Number 10 on the board, moving up 3 spots from last week, and this fan base will think I forgot about them, but it's Columbus. The Blue Jackets continue to get wins. They continue to get wins. They continue to find ways. They're being very creative in how they get their wins. No 2 wins are alike, but they've won enough that Columbus finds themselves in the top 10. And I want to say I don't think Columbus has been in the top 10. I want to say the 2019-2020 season would have been the last time Columbus was in the top 10. I know they've been really high on the power rankings before. They had that ridiculous 16-game winning streak all those years ago. I was doing power rankings at the time, not with the puck board, but I remember Columbus and Minnesota being neck and neck at 1 and 2, and then they played against one another so I could have an easy way to decide the power rankings that week. But Columbus being number 10, it's the first time in a while we've seen that. Number 9, dropping 5 spots from last week, is Toronto. So they got the win tonight in Edmonton. They kind of pulled a Vancouver, didn't they? They had a bad week, and then they got a win on Saturday. So that way people watch the power rankings video and they go, dumb hockey guy, why'd they drop? They won tonight. The rest of the week exists. And so, Toronto, the win tonight in Edmonton, really important. They were very fortunate that Woll got all the saves that he did, and also that goal was offside. Because if Edmonton had tied that game, Edmonton, I think, would have won that game. I don't think Edmonton would have lost. But we can only go by what happened, and Toronto held on and won that game after that goal came back. So they're out of the top row. We'll see for how long. We move into the top row. We go to number 8. Moving up 3 spots from last week, Florida. The Panthers seem to be starting to round into form again. We're into February. It's always interesting to me how month to month you wouldn't think things would change a lot, but it feels like it does. The calendar changes to a different month, and some teams get better and some teams fall apart. Maybe this is where Florida gets better, keeping in mind that it was a win over Chicago today. I thought the amount of celebrating and the way that announcers were putting over the champs, and I was like, but it's Chicago. So they're not 8th because they beat Chicago. They're 8th because they had a good week. The win over Chicago had no effect on where they are on the board. And for Chicago, they were dropping anyways. So Florida's playing better. They're in the top row again. We'll see what happens this coming week. Number 7, dropping 2 spots from last week, Vegas. What's going on with Vegas? The malaise over Vegas. I thought it was done, but it's not. And so Vegas drops down to number 7 this week, and they're in danger. They're in danger of Florida passing them. They're in danger of Columbus passing them. Ottawa, I guess if the Kings have got things together, maybe the Kings. But the Vegas Golden Knights not looking like themselves. That loss against Columbus, huge boost for Columbus in this week's rankings, and a bit of a hit on Vegas. They're usually lights out in the third period or overtime, and especially at the Fortress, and just wasn't there. Number 6 this week, moving up 3 spots from last week, Colorado. So when they made that trade with Carolina, there was a lot of people that seemed to think, well, this is huge for Carolina. They get Rantanen, and I kept thinking, but Natchez is not like a bad player. He's a point producer, and playing him with McKinnon, he's going to get a lot of points, and I think we're seeing that already. Not that I'm saying anything bad about Rantanen or anything, but I just feel like Natchez kind of gets treated like he's dog food by fans. Just looking at that trade, oh, wow, Carolina fleeced him, and I'm thinking, Natchez can hear you. So it's nice to see Natchez producing with Colorado, and the Avs playing still pretty darn well, and so they're up in the top row this week. Number 5, moving up 3 spots as well, despite the loss tonight. Carolina still had a good week, and so they move up into the top 5. The Carolina Hurricanes. And if not for some lucky bounces here and there, who knows? Maybe they would have won that game tonight, right? So Carolina moves up into the top 5. And I'm glad that puck shows up too, even though the light's directly on it. It's going to be a nightmare next week. I have no idea how the lighting in the other room is going to reflect off this board. I don't think I've ever used this board in the other room, so we're going to find out together, aren't we? Anyways, number 5 this week is Carolina. Number 4, dropping 2 spots from last week, Edmonton. Edmonton's fine. I have no concern about Edmonton. I think they're going to be just fine. I think Edmonton and Vegas are both, going through what they're going through. Edmonton losing back-to-back games to close things out, losing against Detroit, losing against Toronto. So they drop a couple of spots from last week. But again, I don't think there's any reason for any concern around the Oilers. They're going to be just fine. I have no doubt in my mind that the Oilers will be in that neck-and-neck race for that first spot with Vegas probably right up until the last weekend of the season. So, which makes it more entertaining. Number 3 this week, moving up 3 spots from last week, is Dallas. Stars are playing well, and what's interesting is they're only 6-4 in their last 10, but Dallas is playing well. They're playing a good game of hockey, and it's entertaining. They're fun to watch. Robertson and Johnston, they're top producers over the last 6 to 8 weeks. That's what you want. Even without Miro, I think they'll be okay. I have my fingers crossed they'll be fine. But without Miro, it is going to be more of a challenge for them to stay in that spot on the board. And so this upcoming week, would I be surprised if they drop a spot or two? Not necessarily. And they probably won't even have to play badly, just if Edmonton plays the way I know they can, and if Colorado plays the way I know they can, or Vegas, we could see a drop there. So we get to 1 and 2. Number 2 this week, dropping 1 spot from last week, Caps. The Capitals, they lose back-to-back games. They got points in both. So they lose against the Ottawa Senators. They lose against Winnipeg. Good games, entertaining games, absolutely. Ovechkin continues his march towards Gretzky's goal record. But yeah, the Capitals, back-to-back losses. They do drop down to number 2 from last week because they got beaten by the number 1 team. Moving up 2 spots from last week is Winnipeg. The Jets, right now, best team in the game? Maybe. According to the Power Rankings board, they are. And, Winnipeg is very likely to end up being the number 1 team in the West. The real pressure on Winnipeg is playoffs. That's where we're going to find out what Winnipeg's made of and whether or not this year is really and truly different from last season and other previous seasons where they've had very good regular seasons and then in the playoffs they've had their stumbles. So, they're number 1 this week. It's not the first time they've been number 1 this season. It's the first time for a while. But there you go. Week 17 Power Rankings. So we are 17 weeks into the season. If people want to know, so how many, with the Power Rankings, normally it's 26 weeks. So 9 more Power Rankings until playoffs. And I do not do Power Rankings in the playoffs because those are silly. They age poorly and it's just teams are against each other. It's different. You can't do playoff Power Rankings. I tried and it just didn't work. But anyways, there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you may not have done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.